It's a pleasure to be here today, so thank you to everyone for participating. And yeah, let's get right into it. So today we're talking about something that most people think it's not that much of a complex topic, because on the one side you have CBAM and on the other side you have hydrogen. So it's basically pretty clear. The issue with it is that there's an intersection between both of these topics that truly is more complex than it seems. So my name is Rozalba Xhori from Entronovo. I'm the founder of Entronovo, and yeah, we're going to cut through the noise with this topic for the next 30 minutes. Just a bit of an introduction about myself. My background is chemical engineering, and I started my career in a green hydrogen power plant. So it was a 1 megawatt power plant for the production of green hydrogen and also biomethane. A part of it was shipped to an off-taker, and a part of the hydrogen was used to produce the catalytic biomethane, which was consequently or further injected to the grid. So I was with this project from the beginning, so from the feed study to the commissioning, and it took part in a time where the whole hydrogen market was in its baby steps, let's say, in the commercial market. And so there were a lot of different issues or different aspects that were not regulated yet, that were not clear yet. And it was also at a time during 2022 and 2023 where the war in Ukraine also broke out, which basically made hydrogen be seen in the public eye as this tool for everything. And so there was a big hype about hydrogen, and suddenly everybody had heard something about hydrogen. And the reason for it is does not only come from the climate perspective or the decarbonization perspective, but also because of security of supply. So at the time, the projects that were announced had large-scale aspects to them. So there were about 500 megawatts. We were then talking about gigawatt factories. So at that point, two aspects for the whole industry came to me, or let's say there were two aspects or two questions that I posed. And the first one was, who's going to provide the technology for such projects? And it's not only about the electrolyzers, because that's why you need to produce green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen, but also the balance of plant, the whole software and hardware, and the piping and instrumentation, etc. So everything in such plants, who will have the capacity. And the second topic, or the second question, was, why are we even doing projects like this? So why do we need hydrogen? Because it's, at the time, or still, it's seen as a tool for everything. So it can be used as an energy source, you can call it, as an energy storage. It can be used to decarbonize different industries, etc. So it is very versatile, but it's also not one of those, it's not a one-size-fits-all type of project. And so I was wondering why we're doing all of this. And the reason for that is because we need to decarbonize, and we need to ensure security of supply for gas. So that's what led to the foundation of Entronovo, and we've been active ever since as a boutique consultancy for hydrogen decarbonization, for sustainability topics, and CBAM as well. So we work closely with technology providers. Okay, this was a long intro to myself. Now let's get into it. Just a bit about the agenda today. Very easily or simply divided into a short CBAM intro. Then we'll talk a lot about hydrogen, and then we'll talk about the connection or the intersection between CBAM and renewable hydrogen mainly. So when it comes to the carbon border adjustment mechanism, very quickly, it is a carbon tariff on the embedded CO2 imports to the EU. So it is the embedded CO2 in the products to prevent carbon leakage, because the origination of the carbon border adjustment mechanism was to prevent companies that do not want to adhere, let's say, to the regulation or to the climate regulation in Europe, and they would move their production to another country that had weaker climate rules or regulations than the EU, and that would be basically a loophole. And so with CBAM, Europe is now trying to level the playing field so that producers in third countries, so outside of Europe, which is the rest of the world, are playing by the same rules and have the same costs and obligations as producers in the European Union. It starts already next month. The sectors affected are iron and steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. And the price, and this is what makes CBAM different from other, let's say, environmental policies, is that it's not only a policy, it is a financial instrument as well. So it is a trade mechanism. And it is tied to the European ETS carbon price, which today was at about $82. And I'm sure JJ will, Janios will talk about the pricing a bit later, maybe, but it's not an easy calculation. Let's say the formula is quite clear, but information needed for it is has not yet been announced by the Commission, and also it might sound easy, but it's not. So maybe Dubrink can help you with this. So the carbon border adjustment mechanism, it's tied to the ETS and to the free allocations. And we'll see in the next chart the timeline for the phase-in and the phase-out, phase-in of CBAM and the phase-out of the free allowances. And you see here the connection is the following. With the free allowances, basically emitters or producers in the European Union had, let's say, free passes up to a certain point for the emissions that they emit. And now the free allowances are going to be phased out until 2030, and simultaneously CBAM is going to be phased in, which means both local domestic producers in the EU and imported goods are going to have, let's say, are going to pay for the full emissions that they emit. So there will not be any more allowances, other than in specific cases, which include renewable hydrogen. And yeah, we can now move a bit into the hydrogen sphere. So hydrogen, first of all, it is on its own, it's just a chemical, so it's a substance. And what makes the market are the whole regulatory aspects to it. And this might look a bit confusing. The biggest frameworks that are regulating it consider aspects in the supply definition and the certification, in demand creation, in the pricing mechanisms for carbon emissions, and also in the investments in the infrastructure. And so when it comes to supply definition and certification, Europe has a very clear target and very clear goals when it comes to hydrogen. Hydrogen has to be renewable, which means it has to be produced by renewable sources. There are certain quotas that are defined in the RFNBO regulation, in the delegated acts for the Renewable Energy Directive. So, and that is the RFNBO definition, which stands for renewable fuels of non-biological origins. So the quotas or the demand created by this regulation is that there has to be 42 to 60% of the imported or the generated hydrogen in Europe has to be of a fuel of non-biological origin, and it has to be renewable. So this is a very specific topic because there are certifications to it. So it's not, if you want to compare it, for example, to the electricity sector where you have the guarantees of origin, it is such a certification that also requires traceability and additionality to it. So this is a must. So this demand is created. Furthermore, there are different frameworks that regulate it as well. Not only the delegated acts, so the guiding implementation, but also this whole the whole support for hydrogen and also for CBAM come from the Repower EU and the Fit for 55. So there are bigger decarbonization goals that include hydrogen and CBAM. Just a bit more about the RFNBO definition. The threshold is basically that it has to have a 70% reduction in comparison to fossil hydrogen, which is the traditional way of producing hydrogen at the moment, and it has quite high emissions. Now, for the demand creation, for different industries, such as the transport, aviation, the maritime sector, and last but not least, the hard-to-abate industry, so steel and iron, cement, aluminum as well. Those are the application fields for hydrogen. And Europe has quite big goals when it comes to this. We'll talk about the current status of hydrogen in a second, but this is basically what it is envisioned in Europe. So to support this demand and supply, there are also the pricing mechanisms for carbon. And as I mentioned before, green or low carbon producers of hydrogen will get free allowances from 2025 for the hydrogen that they produce. So what this means is that the RFNBO hydrogen is going to be emission free. So it doesn't have any emissions. Now, as with every market, there's a supply part, there's a demand side, and there's also an infrastructure in the middle that ensures the distribution of the product, let's say. And how Europe is planning to do this distribution is in different shipping methods, let's say, or in different transfer modes. So one of those, or the biggest investment, is the European hydrogen backbone, which includes about 53,000 kilometers of gas grids for hydrogen until 2040. And about 60% of those are going to be repurposed pipelines from natural gas. And yeah, that is going to be what connects hydrogen to the demand side in Europe. When it comes to the financials of it, there's a European Hydrogen Bank, which works on an auction-based method or framework. There's the H2 Global and the Net Zero Industry Act. So there are already a lot of projects that are being financed by these frameworks in Europe, and also outside of Europe. And Europe has a lot of different partnerships with different countries in the world that when it comes to importing hydrogen. And the main thing here is that we're always talking about renewable or low carbon hydrogen, because that is the prerogative when it comes to importing hydrogen. Yes, so these are the four levers when it comes to hydrogen, and it is important to understand this because when it comes to let's say to the reality, what it looks like is that there are almost no imports of pure hydrogen at the moment. All of these plans are in place to create or to ramp up the market that is currently being created. And Europe wants to import about 10 million tons in 2030 and ramp up the local production or the domestic production up to 10 million tons. The difficulty with that is that what's already committed is 0.6 million tons in domestic production and 0.3 million tons in imports, which means these are already committed contracts, and we know this capacity is going to come. Still, with this 0.9 million tons, or as of 2025, as of today, we have 4.5% of what we need by 2030. And the current supply or the current production in Europe is about 6.5 million tons of domestic gray hydrogen production, which is which has a higher carbon intensity, and we have less than 1 million tons imports, so about 0.2 0.4. And the consumption totals up to almost 8 million tons of gray hydrogen. So we need to grow clean hydrogen from 0.9 to 20 megatons in 5 years, and simultaneously replace 7.9 million tons of existing gray hydrogen. And so the gap basically isn't just large, but it's a structural one. And it is also why hydrogen is not just an energy story, but it's an infrastructure, finance, and a policy story. Now, this looks a bit bleak, but there is progress. Here to show you the global clean hydrogen projects at the moment. There are 6 million tons committed globally. So committed means they have reached a final investment decision. And there are 16.3 million tons announced globally, but are not committed, which means they have not yet reached the final investment decision, independent of where they are in the planning phase. So it doesn't matter if they're in the FEED study or ending the FEED study and the business case. So when we look at the map, we see that Europe has almost 200 committed projects, and 95% of them are under 15 kilotons of production of hydrogen. So they're quite small scale. When we look at China, we have a lot of large industrial hubs, as well as in America. So we can see how the production is distributed globally. So this is to show that, let's say, hydrogen is not only a European story. So it's not something that Europe is trying to develop on its own. This is a global initiative. And when we look at America, there are already 94 committed projects, and many of those are large scale. And so, and so many of those are low carbon financial investment decisions. So it's blue hydrogen with carbon capture. Now, we see that there is progress, because from 24 to 25, there have been more than 83 new projects that have reached the final investment decision. So there is progress in this field, and so also the word of mouth on the field, if you would like it. So working with technology providers, it's very clear that the market sense basically has changed from a couple of years ago, where they would get a lot of inquiries or a lot of requests, but they would not be serious ones, let's say. So it was basically just to get to know the business case for hydrogen. And now the number of requests, or the inquiries, has slowed down. It's getting lower, but the requests that come are mature projects. And so this is to say that just because there are less requests, it doesn't mean that the quality isn't still there. And factually, it's even better, because the sector has matured, which means it's, when there are requests, it is about factual projects. So about hydrogen, now we see that there is progress. The question is now, so why isn't it flowing yet? We saw that there are almost no imports in hydrogen at the moment, even though there is the demand. There are 3 reasons for it. So first of all, the infrastructure isn't there yet. The hydrogen backbone, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong number earlier. That was the previous target. At the moment, the new target is 39 per almost 40,000 kilometers by 2040. But the reason, one of the reasons is that the infrastructure isn't there yet. So this almost 40,000 kilometers are not yet factual. Those are planned. And Germany's first 520 kilometers segment, it's basically the closest to near-term reality. The second reason is that projects are slowly converting to reality. It is an unclear market for many, and a lot of people in the industry joke that this is a race and everybody's hoping to finish second, basically because nobody wants to be the first one to learn from the mistakes. And there's a type of circular dependency where the producers are waiting for the pipelines and the pipelines are waiting for the demand, and demand waits for supply availability. So basically everybody's looking at each other saying, you should go first so that I can do it as well, to put it plainly. The third reason is that there is a lack of market and contract certainty, especially because with green hydrogen, you need renewable energy sources, and that would translate to PPAs or to solar or wind turbine plants. And those are usually projects that you will need a contract for the next 10 or 15 years. And so that's what makes projects for hydrogen, like hydrogen projects, also a bit difficult, because maybe there's a bit more certainty on the renewables, but there's less certainty on the demand of hydrogen, and as well on electricity prices. So that makes it very difficult to settle on a fixed hydrogen price as well for renewable hydrogen. So it is the classic chicken and egg infrastructure problem, and it is also exactly where interventions like CBAM or mechanisms like CBAM matter. Now, you heard me talk about green hydrogen, and I mentioned blue hydrogen as well. So you might be asking, what is it with all the colors? There's a market convention. It's not a specific or defined framework, but it's more a market convention where the different color codes or the color scheme shows how the hydrogen is produced. So when we're talking about green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen, what is meant is the production method of producing hydrogen through renewable electricity and the electrolyzers. That kind of hydrogen is also defined as an RFNBO, so as a renewable fuel of non-biological origin, and it factually has 0 emissions and no CBAM cost. Gray hydrogen is produced through steam methane reforming, so it comes from natural gas plus steam, and it is the traditional method of producing hydrogen. So more than 95% of the global hydrogen production is gray, and it has the highest emissions. It definitely will have a CBAM cost. Then we have blue hydrogen, which is the production where the production method is the same as for the gray one, but it also includes this, the carbon capture, which means the CO2 that is released during the steam methane reforming is captured. And this is a low carbon type of hydrogen per definition. The publication was also last week on the low carbon hydrogen framework. And the emissions intensity goes from 1 to 3 tons per CO2, tons CO2 per ton hydrogen. There will be CBAM costs for this type of emissions. And there's also pink hydrogen, which is also defined as a low carbon fuel. And this is the production method is also the electrolyzers, but the source of the electricity is not renewables like wind or solar modules, but it is nuclear energy. So this is grounds for discussion, because there are also opinions when it comes to nuclear energy saying that it is factually clear, but this is the definition according to the European Commission. It will have also CBAM costs, because out of all of the different types of or colors of hydrogen, it is only the RFNBO hydrogen that basically gets the free allowances, and the rest will be having a CBAM cost depending on the emissions intensity. And And as I mentioned before, the Renewable Energy Directive mandates 42 to 60% RFNBO fuels by 2030 and by 2035. And the rest will be covered by low carbon hydrogen. And now for the definition of RFNBO fuels, there are strict rules when it comes to the certification and different certification schemes. So not automatically all types of green hydrogen or every production of green hydrogen counts as a RFNBO fuel because it has to be certified. So to make here the comparison also to electricity as well. For example, for electricity, it is enough to say this is the guarantee of origin for my renewable solar or wind energy or electricity. For hydrogen, it really has to go through all of the strict qualification or the strict certification criteria. Now, we're talking about hydrogen. We know that we don't yet have enough production. We don't have the infrastructure yet. So the question is, where do we even need it, let's say? So when we look at the applications for hydrogen, I would like to show you this chart from the Global Hydrogen Compass for 2025, which breaks down the clean hydrogen binding offtake by end-use sector. Now we see that most of it is used in ammonia production and refining, and the rest of uses the rest of the uses go to power generation, basically the seasonal storage or peak demand, because hydrogen is also used as a storage tool, let's say for electricity. And that is the core idea, or that was the core idea for hydrogen, that you can produce hydrogen from so when you have overproduction or surplus of renewable electricity, that you can use it to produce hydrogen and then store it without losing it, basically. And the difference to batteries is also that you can store it for seasonal time, and not only for a couple of days. Power is one of the sectors, and then we see steel, and hydrogen is used in direct reduced iron production. We see the maritime sector, and then we have also methanol e-fuels in the very small brackets here, and other applications that make up the rest. Now, just to give you an overview on why we need hydrogen, not only for storage of electricity, but also to decarbonize the industry. Now we see the CO2 reduction potential by sector, and these numbers are quite high. And so this is basically where hydrogen intersects also with CBAM, because on the one side, yes, hydrogen is a CBAM product, but on the other side, hydrogen is also the tool to reduce CBAM costs, because you cannot you will have to pay the CBAM cost based on the calculation. So be it default values, be it your supplier emission data, that cost is going to be there. There are ways to hedge it, but long term, it might also make sense to think of a way to reduce the emissions physically. And so hydrogen is one of the tools to do that in certain industries, especially the hard to abate industry. And so it isn't just one use case, it's a decarbonization pathway for the hard to abate sectors. And this is why covering hydrogen from a CBAM perspective matters, because it's a lever for everything downstream. Now we have Now we see where we need hydrogen. So how can we get it there? The problem is that hydrogen doesn't ship well, per se. It is the smallest molecule. And if you compress it as a gas, you cannot compress it for long tracks, basically, because it does diffuse and lose pressure. I think this is not the best day for my throat, so you will excuse me. But anyway, we have 3 transportation modes. So a road transportation for rather short distances, so where you use compressed gas hydrogen or liquid hydrogen. So you either compress it as a gas at about 700 bar or different. So depending on the size and the application as well on the demand side, and but usually trailers are at about 700 bar. Or you can compress it, or you can liquefy it and transport it as a liquid. But that is also, there are some constraints to it because it cannot be stored as a liquid for very long amounts of times. The other transportation mode is through pipelines, and this is why the European hydrogen backbone is such a big project because not only does it serve as a transportation method, but also as a storage method. And this is where we come to the concept of sector coupling, using hydrogen to basically take off the burden from the electricity grid, or to stabilize the electricity grid. Hydrogen can also be shipped, but it has to be converted to either liquid hydrogen or to hydrogen carriers, which are ammonia, liquid organic hydrogen carriers, or methanol. So this is where it gets very interesting also for CBAM, because ammonia is also a CBAM product. And now ammonia is also the front runner for long distance shipping of hydrogen, and it's liquid at manageable temperatures. There is the existing infrastructure and the shipping routes. This is critical because every conversion step costs money and energy, and production, liquefaction, shipping, and cracking back to hydrogen. That's the entire transportation, basically from a hydrogen molecule in the production country, let's say, to the demand or the place that is going to be used. And so this is why CBAM economics matter, because if the carrier molecule has embedded emissions, then you're paying for every step, basically. Now, as mentioned for hydrogen, gray hydrogen is the traditional method of production of hydrogen. So this is how we have gotten more than 95% of all the hydrogen in the world. And to produce ammonia, you need hydrogen and nitrogen. So if you use gray hydrogen, then you will have gray ammonia. And so you will have multiplied emissions in the end. And that will not work well for starting 2026. Now, what is the case against gray ammonia, let's say? So what is the case against gray ammonia and the case for green hydrogen or green ammonia? So based on the numbers from the International Power to X Hub, they released this last week as well. So gray ammonia has 1.9 tons of CO2 per emissions per ton of ammonia. And these are only the direct emissions. So currently only the direct emissions will count, and the indirect emissions at the current version will not count at the current version. Now, if we calculate it for 2030, 2034, using a CBAM, a CO2 price of 149, these are the Bloomberg prognosis, and the phasing, then we're looking at such costs. And now to deliver 1 ton of usable hydrogen to Europe, basically for 1 ton of hydrogen, you need 5 tons of ammonia. And you bind it, let's say, in 5.7 tons of ammonia. And that makes the CBAM cost for 2030 go up to 740 euros per ton of hydrogen. Now you add synthesis to it, the shipping, the cracking, etc., and you get a premium of up to 1,000, so more than 1,000 euros per ton for the green hydrogen. And so you have almost 78 or 71 actually % higher costs than when using renewable hydrogen. And so this is where everything comes together, basically. All the directives that we saw in the beginning, the case for hydrogen, so the demand, the supply, and also the carbon pricing emissions, and what is happening also with the trading, the emission trading system, is that we want to phase out but not explicitly phase out the gray or the fossil fuels, which is are preparing the conditions and the structure so that these fuels are just not economically viable anymore. Now, these are big numbers. It is a structural cost, and as I said, this is the goal and the case against gray ammonia. The question is, now that we see we can make, or we need to make ammonia, we need to produce ammonia with hydrogen, and we need hydrogen in Europe, so how we're going to get it? And as I mentioned before, there are different partnerships with different countries in the world, especially in North Africa, because to produce green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen. The thing is, these countries have lower electricity prices than Europe, because currently the electricity prices in Europe are quite high, and those are tied directly to the cost of hydrogen. But now let's take an example of a company in Morocco that produces 1 ton of renewable hydrogen. Now, they have 2 options, let's say. So the first option is to directly transport it to Europe at, let's say, about a price of about 820 euros per ton of ammonia, and they generate 820 millions of revenue, let's say, from this the ammonia. Option 2 is basically to use the hydrogen that they produce in the country, the renewable hydrogen, to hedge CBAM costs in other sectors, so to lower the CBAM costs for steel, iron, cement, etc., whatever that country produces, or neighboring countries as well. So let's take the steel example. The hydrogen-based, so the direct reduced iron, uses way less, so uses 0.07 tons of hydrogen for 1 ton of steel. We have the traditional blast furnace that emits 1.8 to 2 tons of CO2 per ton of steel. And so we have about, for 1 million ton of renewable hydrogen, if we use it to decarbonize a steel factory, of almost 25 million tons of CO2 that will be avoided. And 25 million tons at a CO2 price in 2030 of, let's say, 140 or even 130, it does make a very big difference. So it is way, so we're talking in billions here. And calculating also for the phase-in, let's say at 48.5% of CBAM, we're still talking about billions. So this is a very big case when it comes to renewable hydrogen, because we are trying to protect the local hydrogen economy as well in Europe by also trying to push the domestic production, and at the same time we're making the case to import only renewable hydrogen. But with CBAM, we're also putting the pressure on these partners and producers of renewable hydrogen that we need to decarbonize our industries as well. We're putting the pressure on them for them to also decarbonize their other hard-to-abate sectors. And so this is fundamentally the question that they will pose themselves, and the calculations that they will be making. So does it pay more, or what's the biggest ROI on my on the way that I use the hydrogen, the renewable hydrogen that I produce. Is it to directly export it to the European Union, or is it to use it domestically or in the region, so that other sectors, or basically products or finished goods, can be decarbonized? Should this renewable hydrogen go there, or will it be more valuable there? And basically, it's also a question of the price. Now, this is fundamentally so it is a different technology. So different from the blast furnace. When we're talking about billions, basically we are going over to 2040. Then this investment is also, let's say, included or part of this of the calculation. Now, this will fundamentally change the trade flows. So this is one of the questions that is directly induced by CBAM as well. Now, let's make the case for renewable hydrogen. We said it can be used to decarbonize the industry, and we saw the example earlier. But how is it? How does it play in the whole CBAM ecosystem? And basically, it can be used to almost decarbonize all of CBAM products. In the steel example, as I mentioned, with the direct reduced iron to replace the blast furnace. In cement, it can replace the fossil fuels in kilns. In aluminium, it can be used in the calcination of primary aluminium. And we're talking about renewable hydrogen here with no emissions. For fertilizers, it can replace the gray hydrogen in ammonia production. And in electricity, it can store renewables as green hydrogen or as renewable hydrogen, and that displaces the fossil power generation, because basically the surplus energy or the surplus electricity is used, and it is stored. So we see that hydrogen decarbonizes other CBAM sectors, and those are the sectors that drive hydrogen demand as well. So CBAM makes both viable at the same time. And it's not just hydrogen basically has created the CBAM demand, so from the regulations that we mentioned earlier, but CBAM also creates hydrogen demand globally, because the long-term play is not to just pay the price, but to decarbonize. So this is basically the point, that hydrogen enables CBAM compliance, and CBAM creates the demand. Great. What I want to leave you with now is the message or the takeaways for this presentation, and so for the connection or the intersection of CBAM and hydrogen. So the Renewable Energy Directive, the free allocation phase out, and the CBAM phase in make the case for green hydrogen. So the RFNBO hydrogen pays 0 CBAM, and basically CBAM makes everything else, so the fossil fuel or the gray route, expensive, and that's the business case. Now, in the hydrogen industry, the problem at the moment is the price and the cost. So as long as we do not get to the desired price, the market is not going to ramp up. And so this is why CBAM and other carbon pricing mechanisms make the case for hydrogen, not only because they make, let's say they exclude renewable hydrogen from having duties that fossil fuels, for example, or high emitting or high carbon intensity fuels will have. They will get more expensive, and suddenly green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen will make sense. CBAM will have an impact on non-renewable demand of hydrogen, because it will raise the costs of importing it from abroad. And not only will it be expensive to use hydrogen in Europe, but also to import it. And the biggest message, or the most important message, is that yes, CBAM covers 6 sectors, and hydrogen is one of them, but it definitely connects to all the others. So it isn't. This isn't just about hydrogen for hydrogen's sake. It's about hydrogen as the enabler for industrial decarbonization at scale, and ultimately to lower the CBAM costs for the hard-to-abate industry. So this was on my side. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for questions if there are any, and yeah, ready to or happy to talk with whatever questions you have. You can also reach out to me after the webinar, either on LinkedIn or per email. Thank you for your time. Janios, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rozalba. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I'm incredibly curious how hydrogen is going to play a role in a, post EU ETS world, or not post EU ETS, but EU ETS free allowance, where things just become so incredibly expensive. Sorry, that was really that was obviously not what I wanted to say. I wanted to say post free allowance. I'm incredibly curious because the cost increase in some cases that I have seen is substantial, and switching from the blast furnace to hydrogen-based DRI and then rolling that into an EAF plant could potentially for the industry be one of the only ways to make new steel in Europe in a financially viable way. So yeah, I'm personally very, very intrigued to see how that's going to pan out in the, it's obviously not something that we're going to spin up in the next year, but having the infrastructure set up in the next, 2, 3, 5 years, yeah, it's critical for the future of Europe in a sense, and having
Definitely.
and being able to do that in a carbon neutral sense, of course, is the only way, because otherwise we would beat the whole purpose. Yeah, I mean, that's everything from my side. I think from a CBAM point of view, I very much understand why they include it in CBAM, right? Because I can understand that if you replace the infrastructure with gray hydrogen, there's very little benefit that you really get, because the hydrogen that I've seen, or specifically the emission factors of hydrogen that I've seen, they are so much worse than. Yeah. So if you purely use it as a fuel source from gray origin, it's terrible. But if you can actually manage to source it, in a green way.
Yeah. This is also why Europe's goal is to source either the RFNBO hydrogen or low carbon hydrogen, because we do not want to let's say make it possible to buy fossil or gray hydrogen anymore. And so CBAM also, or the phase out of the free allowances, they play such a big role in making the case, or the business case, for green hydrogen, because at the moment it is not yet at the price where gray hydrogen is. So the market is not going to solve that on its own without having other levers. And so CBAM and the phase out of the free allowances is that exact lever. And I mean, it follows also the principle of CBAM, that you cannot produce it elsewhere, or of the ETS, you cannot produce it with high emissions in Europe either, and just be competitive on price. And so we're seeing, not only with the carbon pricing mechanisms, but just in general, also with supply, etc., that CO2 is going to be priced. So it does have a price, and now it will play a bigger role also in the industry and in trade, and basically the free permits are not going to be there anymore. So I think now it is very clear that we are serious about going or decarbonizing the industry as well. And yes, you mentioned the numbers, and it is shocking to me as well. So these are the numbers from the readiness toolkit that the Power-to-X Hub released, but it makes sense. when you look at the emissions intensity and the calculation formula, these are the prices. And basically the price for a ton of ammonia is 820. So it varies, but for Northern Africa, it is 820. And then you see that there's a premium basically that, or the CBAM price, or the carbon cost of hydrogen shipped as ammonia is almost, 1.5 times that. So it cannot be feasible anymore. And the case for green ammonia or for renewable ammonia is totally different then. But then we go to the question if how will the market change basically when it comes to hydrogen and to ammonia in third countries, so in countries that will export to Europe. So yeah, I do share your concerns. Thank you for putting it that way.
I think Marcel wants to also ask a question. So Marcel, maybe.
Yes, I do actually. First of all, Rozalba, thank you for providing this information on this webinar. You have a very specific knowledge base, which is very interesting. I had to miss the beginning of the webinar, so maybe the topic has been already discussed. But as you might know, the EU decided a few days ago that we will completely stop with Russian gas, I think already in 2027. I was wondering if you think that might accelerate the adoption of green hydrogen in the upcoming years.
Yes, hi Marcel, it's good to have you, and thank you for having me as well. So about that question, I mentioned it right in the beginning when I was talking about the hydrogen project that I was working on, and it was around the time where basically the alarm came out that we're not going to get any more gas from Russia. So there was a big fear, let's say, and it was right. So it was in winter basically. So people were scared about not having a security of supply, and this is why Europe has also brought out the gas markets package, gas and hydrogen markets package, and a lot of these things come from it as well. So the Renewable Energy Directive is also tied to it. So this is basically the ramp-up plan that Europe has been preparing. And that we were going to step out of Russian gas. That was the goal. And I think it was clear in the Commission as well that is the goal. And so everything that has been done in terms of hydrogen is also to ensure that we're not dependent on another country for the gas. And for example, with the hydrogen backbone, so that's the infrastructure, that's a gas grid for hydrogen that is planned until 2040. About 60% of the pipelines are going to be retrofitted gas pipelines. So basically, we are pushing hydrogen to be our domestic gas, as you would call it. I mean, we will blend it as well with natural gas, but if we can get to a point, not in the next 10 years, but maybe until 2050, where we only use hydrogen as a primary gas, or we use hydrogen to produce biomethane, for example, or sustainable aviation fuels, then hydrogen will be, let's say, the domestic gas or the middle step to other fuels, so that we can ensure that we're not dependent anymore on Russian gas or any other type of gas, basically. Does that answer your question, more or less?
You are muted, Marcel, sorry.
Oh, yes, thank you. And I think I can imagine that because the gas is getting more expensive, that step by step also the green hydrogen becomes simply more attractive, isn't it?
Yeah. Definitely, because hydrogen, so gray hydrogen, comes from steam methane reforming. So if gas is more expensive, then the methane, or basically the gas used in gray hydrogen, is going to get more expensive. And yeah, it's exactly how you say it.
Yeah,
it will get more expensive. Yeah?
Thank you. If there are any other questions, maybe. then yeah, I leave it up to you. I joined the webinar, so.
No, all right. I think I would very much like to leave it here as well. So Rozalba, thank you very, very much for this very insightful update on hydrogen. Of course, I think it's a little early for CBAM, but what would be very, very, that's maybe my closing remark is I just hope that, and that's, no, let me collect my thoughts. What would be great to see is that we start importing clean, green hydrogen. There is a 0 additional CBAM charge as a result. And if you do feel tempted to bring in the worst kind, then you're going to compensate through very, very high, steep CBAM charges. And I think that is exactly how this mechanism could, do exactly what we want. So that's a very powerful, very powerful message. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, for attending. I wish you all a lovely remainder of the day. And if there's any questions related to CBAM or, of course, hydrogen, please get in touch with Rozalba. And I think she can obviously tell you a lot more, also specific use cases and any of the projects that are ongoing. I'm sure she'll be able to help you with that.
Yeah, happy to do that. Thank you for having me. It was great. Yeah, wish you all a good day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.